Happy Friday, everyone. So this section of reading really talked a lot about climates and microclimates and why those are important to grape growing. From other geography classes that I've taken, climate is a huge part. Understanding climate is a huge part of geography. So it's pretty obvious why that would be part of the discussion of wine is geography in a bottle. So this week especially, we read a lot about two main climates, marine west versus Mediterranean. And I found that really interesting because marine west climates tend to be better for growing I don't want to say softer wines because that doesn't make it sound like they are as complex or as important. But grapes like Pinot Noir, grow really well in both Washington and Oregon, and also in Burgundy, whereas bigger wines like Cabernet grow and taste different, but really thrive in places that have a more Mediterranean climate, like Napa Valley or Bordeaux. So very similar places, meaning like geographically they're, in the same country, but, in the case of California, they're, on the same coast. But very different treatments of grapes and what the climate does. And so, obviously the best, most profitable grape growing regions have seasons. They have cool, wet winters and warm, dry summers. Wine grapes need resting periods. And so places that can really grow wine grapes need to have seasons. The amount of rain in a region is also really important. If it's too wet, if the grapes are too juicy, it's a really flabby, gross, I don't want to say gross. It's not a complex wine. It's going to be weak because water. So, regions that get the right amount of rain do better. It's also interesting, places like Napa Valley and Lodi, and which is just a region I'm more familiar with. They have very warm years and they have very cool wet years, and it really does impact the grapes themselves. It really impacts the wine that's produced for that particular vintage. So I've always found that to be really fascinating. But the best vintners are able to create beautiful wines regardless of, some of those variations year over year. Profitability is also determined by a lot of things, but again, the most profitable wine regions are the ones that can produce really good wine grapes year over year. Interesting thing that's happening in a place like Lodi, I think it started a few years ago, where Constellation, the big bad Constellation, I have no love for Constellation, and neither do any of my friends, determined that Zinfandel was no longer marketable in the same way that it had been previously. And so they were paying grape growers less for Zinfandel grapes. So this was a huge problem because, what grows really, really well in Lodi is Zinfandel. So the last time I was in Lodi, there were just massive, massive piles. It was 2022 was the last time I was in Lodi. Massive piles of vines, old vines Zinfandel that had been torn out to make way for Italian varietals, actually. And that was really, really fascinating, really kind of sad because I'm a big fan of really good Zinfandel. And when asked about it, it came down to the fact that Constellation the company Constellation determined that they were no longer, that Zinfandel was no longer profitable for them. So anyway, I digress. So soil, does it matter? Some would say yes. A lot of people say no, but things that do matter is the drainage of the soil. So, does the type of soil really matter? Is it gravelly? Is it sandy? Etc. Maybe and maybe not. It may not impact the overall taste of the wine, but if there's not good drainage, then your vines aren't gonna do well in that area because, again, water mitigation is really, really important in growing grapes for wine. Topography can also impact whether grapes can be grown in certain places. Obviously, if it's too mountainy, if you can't actually cultivate the vines, if you can't work with the vines in a place, a very mountainous place, then you're not going to be able to grow grapes there. So if the ground is too hard, you're not going to be able to grow grapes there. But topography matters. It also matters because that can impact the drainage of the soil, and also, water retention for, oh my gosh, what is the word? Oh, like watering grapes, watering the vines. It's late. No, it's not. It's only 8:30. I'm old. And then, we also identified some mountain ranges. This particular class specifically in Spain and Italy. And I just find it really fascinating that some of the best growing regions of the world sit in valleys of mountain ranges. And I know that has a lot to do with rain shadows and proper amount of precipitation. So, but it's really kind of a cool, it's, I don't know, I'm a nerd maybe, but I think it's really cool. But, in the same thing, mountain ranges and the weather that comes off of mountains can be really detrimental to vines too. One of, we haven't talked about Mendoza too much yet, but it sits just on the other side of the Andes Mountains. And they are prone to terrible hailstorms. When we were there in 2019, we actually encountered one of these hailstorms. I have this amazing video of the worst hailstorm I've ever seen in my entire life. And people lost whole harvests in those types of hailstorms. That one that hit, vines were destroyed. They've done a lot to address that over the years, but it's a real problem in places like Mendoza and places that sit on the other side of mountain ranges. But it also makes for really, really beautiful wine in places like that. So, obviously this week we talked a lot about Spain, and we talked a lot about France, particularly Bordeaux, which, again, two different areas. This video is already 10 minutes, so I apologize. In Bordeaux, you have basically the tale of two rivers, right? Like where on the one side you have Merlot and lighter wine that grows really well. And then on the other side, you've got Cabernet that grows really well. And what they've done is actually created these beautiful blends over the years, combining these two kind of microclimates into some of the most beautiful wine that is produced in the entire world. So yeah, those are some of my notes from this particular session, and look forward to the next group of readings. Thanks so much. Bye.